Depression rates have tripled in the last decade, but what if the biggest mental health crisis isn't actually depression? It's an epidemic of people living like they're already dead.
That's a pretty bold statement. What makes you say that?
Well, I've been diving into this fascinating perspective that suggests we've been misdiagnosing a massive societal problem. The data shows that while clinical depression diagnoses are up 28% since 2020, there's this whole other phenomenon happening that's more about systematic disengagement from life.
So you're suggesting there's a difference between clinical depression and this kind of existential numbness?
Exactly. And here's what's fascinating. Studies show the average person now spends 7 hours and 11 minutes per day on screens. That's basically a full-time job of digital sedation.
Oh wow, when you put it that way. But isn't this just modern life? Like, how else are we supposed to live in a digital age?
Well, that's the trap right there. You know what neuroscientists have found? Our brains literally can't tell the difference between scrolling social media and being in a light coma. The same brain regions shut down.
That's wild. But surely some screen time is necessary for work and staying connected.
Of course, but here's the key distinction. Research shows it's not about the screens themselves, it's about how we are using them. Like active engagement versus passive consumption makes a huge difference in brain activity patterns.
So what exactly are the warning signs that someone's fallen into this living death trap?
Well, studies point to three main indicators. First, dopamine desensitization, where it takes more and more stimulation to feel anything. Second, time blindness now, where days blur together without meaningful markers. And third, what researchers call social amnesia, where you can't remember the last time you had a real deep conversation.
That's actually making me think about my own habits in a new light. But why do we fall into these patterns so easily?
Here's where it gets really interesting. There's actually a term for this, engineered docility. Tech companies spend billions studying how to keep us in this semi-conscious state. The average app has 800 psychological triggers built in.
That's honestly pretty terrifying. What can people actually do about this though?
Well, research from Stanford's Digital Wellness Lab shows that the brain can reset its dopamine sensitivity in just 72 hours of digital detox. But here's the crucial part. It's not about going off-grid, it's about rewiring your relationship with engagement.
Could you give some specific examples of what that looks like?
Sure, they found that replacing just 30 minutes of passive scrolling with active creation increases neural plasticity by 47%. Even something as simple as writing your thoughts instead of consuming others' content shows measurable brain changes within days.
That's fascinating. But what about people who say they need these digital distractions to cope with stress?
You know what's interesting about that? Recent studies show that what we call digital stress relief actually increases cortisol levels by 15 to 20% over time. It's like using a painkiller that secretly makes the pain worse.
So how do we break free from these patterns without completely disconnecting from modern life?
The research suggests a three-step approach. First, audit your dopamine sources. Track what actually makes you feel alive versus what just prevents you from feeling dead. Second, create what they call friction points. No small barriers between you and automatic behaviors. And third, actively pursue what psychologists call flow states.
That makes sense in theory, but implementing it seems challenging. What about the social aspect?
That's where community becomes crucial. Studies show that people who make these changes with even one accountability partner are 80% more likely to succeed. But, and this is important, they also found that 62% of people had to change their social circles to maintain their progress.
Sounds like some relationships might actually be enabling this kind of living death.
Exactly. The research shows that your 5 closest relationships predict your engagement with life with 83% accuracy. It's what scientists call social contagion. Your level of aliveness is literally contagious.
This whole conversation is really making me rethink what we call normal these days.
And that's exactly the point. The most dangerous part of this whole phenomenon is how we've normalized it. We've accepted this twilight state as just how things are now.
So, what's the first step for someone listening who recognizes themselves in this description?
The data shows the most effective first step is simply tracking your alive to dead ratio for 1 week. Rate each activity from 1 to 10 on how alive it makes you feel. Most people are shocked to find they spend less than 5% of their time above a 7.
That's a pretty powerful wake-up call. Any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, the research ultimately shows that what we are calling depression might often be our soul's immune response to a life that's too small for us. And maybe that's not something we need to fix. Maybe it's something we need to listen to.